The car sputtered and died. Liam was alone, stranded on a deserted road as darkness crept in. The silence was heavy, the trees looming. His phone had no signal. Then, a distant light flickered on a hill. A house, maybe. With hope flickering, he locked the car and walked toward the light. The walk was longer than he expected. The light on the hill flickered, drawing him through the cold, shadowy woods. At last, he reached the old house, its windows dark except for one glowing beacon. He hesitated, then lifted the heavy brass knocker. The echo rang out, swallowed by silence. The door creaked open, revealing a sliver of warm light. An old woman stood in the doorway, her sharp eyes fixed on Liam. "You're late," she whispered. Without waiting, she opened the door wider. "Come in. The night has ears." Inside, the house was old, filled with shadows and secrets. "We were expecting you," she said, smiling thinly. Ilara led Liam through the shadowy house, her steps silent as his echoed loudly. Closed doors lined the long hallway, secrets hidden behind each one. Candlelight flickered, casting distorted shapes on the walls. They stopped at a silent grandfather clock, its hands frozen. "Time has a way of stopping for some," Ilara whispered. The kitchen was vast and dim, dominated by a long wooden table set for one. At its head sat Arthur, pale and motionless, more statue than man. Ilara whispered, "He doesn't speak much these days." Liam sat at a smaller table, shivering as silence pressed in, every instinct warning him something was terribly wrong. After dinner, Ilara led Liam to a wall of old portraits, faces from different eras staring out in silence. The firelight flickered over stern men, somber children, and a dark-haired ancestor who built the house. One portrait, smaller and lost-looking, caught Liam's eye. "Who is that?" he whispered. "A visitor," Ilara replied. "He never left." Ilara did not elaborate on Thomas's fate. She simply turned and continued the tour, leading Liam into a vast, dimly lit library. Bookshelves stretched to the ceiling, filled with ancient, faded tomes. The silence was thick, humming with whispers. Liam strained to listen, feeling a chill as the books seemed to murmur his name. He spun around. Ilara watched him, calm. "The house is old," she said. "It has many voices." Finally, Ilara announced it was time for him to rest. She led him up a grand, creaking staircase to the second floor. The banister was slick and cool under his hand. The air was even colder up here. The upstairs hallway was a mirror of the one below, a long, dark corridor lined with closed doors. A single bare bulb hanging from a wire in the ceiling did little to push back the oppressive darkness. Their shadows stretched long and distorted behind them, two ghostly figures moving through the gloom. Liam felt a profound sense of isolation, as if he were miles away from the warmth of the fire downstairs, miles away from civilization itself. They stopped at the very last door at the end of the hall. It was set apart from the others, and the wood seemed darker, more weathered. "This will be your room," Ilara said, producing an old, ornate skeleton key from a pocket in her dress. The lock turned with a loud, grating click that echoed down the empty hallway. She pushed the door open, revealing a simple room. It contained a bed with a heavy quilt, a small wooden nightstand with a candle, a wardrobe, and a single window that looked out into the blackness of the night. It was sparse, almost like a cell. "I trust you will be comfortable," Ilara said, her hand still on the doorknob. Rest well. You have a long day ahead of you tomorrow." The words sounded more like a prophecy than a pleasantry. Liam stood in the doorway, hesitant to enter. The room felt expectant, as if it had been waiting for him. He thought of the portrait of Thomas, the visitor who never left. Was this his room? He wanted to ask, but he was afraid of the answer. He just wanted the night to be over. He wanted to see the sun again. He wanted to wake up from this nightmare. He stepped inside, and Ilara started to close the door. "Wait," Liam said suddenly. "You're not locking me in, are you?" A thin smile touched Ilara's lips. It was the same cryptic, unsettling smile from before. "Of course not," she whispered, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "You are our guest. The lock is on the inside." She held up the skeleton key, then placed it in the lock on his side of the door before pulling it shut. The final click of the latch was like a judge's gavel. He was alone. He was in the room at the end of the hall. Liam stood frozen, listening to Ilara's footsteps fade. Alone, the silence pressed in, thick and watchful. It made the hairs on his neck stand up. He turned the key in the lock, the click echoing finality. Outside, darkness pressed against the house, as if it floated in a void. In the silence, Liam saw Thomas's fearful eyes and understood. Liam must have drifted off, because he was startled awake by a sound. It was faint at first, easy to dismiss as part of a dream or the old house settling. A soft, rhythmic scratching. He lay perfectly still, his eyes wide open in the near darkness, straining his ears. The candle on the nightstand had burned down low, its flame sputtering, casting long, trembling shadows that made the room seem to move. The scratching came again, louder this time. It was coming from the window. It was a dry, scraping sound, like a branch being dragged across the glass. But he had seen nothing outside but darkness. There were no trees close enough to touch the window. His heart began to pound against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the otherwise silent room. He slowly sat up, the bed creaking in protest. His eyes were glued to the window. The scratching stopped. Silence flooded the room once more, heavier and more menacing than before. He held his breath, waiting. Was it his imagination? Was the exhaustion and fear playing tricks on his mind? He tried to tell himself it was just the wind, even though he hadn't heard any wind. It was an old house, and old houses made noises. He repeated this to himself like a mantra, a desperate attempt to stay calm. Then the scratching started again, more insistent this time. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It was methodical, deliberate. It was not the sound of a branch. It sounded like fingernails. Long, sharp fingernails dragging slowly down the glass. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He couldn't move. He was paralyzed by a primal fear, the fear of the unknown thing that was just on the other side of that thin pane of glass, hidden by the night. He wanted to scream, but his throat was tight with terror. He could only sit there, a statue of fear, listening to the horrifying sound. Suddenly, it stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Liam stayed frozen, his muscles coiled tight, ready to spring. He waited for what felt like an eternity. Nothing happened. The sound did not return. Slowly, painstakingly, he forced his trembling legs to move. He crept out of bed, his bare feet silent on the cold wooden floor. He had to see. He had to know. With his heart in his throat, he tiptoed toward the window, his own reflection a ghostly companion moving with him. He leaned in close, his breath fogging a small patch on the cold glass, and peered into the darkness. He saw nothing but the reflection of his own terrified face. Liam stood shivering in the darkness, the candle extinguished, fear and cold mingling in the air. He paced, but each time he neared the wardrobe, a pocket of unnatural cold gripped him, a chill that felt alive. The rest of the room was merely chilly, but this corner was a void, a presence that defied explanation. Liam backed away, eyes fixed on the deepening shadows, realizing with horror that something was in the room with him. He slid down the opposite wall, clutching the quilt, unable to look away from the cold, haunted corner. Huddled against the wall, Liam listened as whispers filled the room, seeping from the very walls. The voices were mournful, overlapping, a man, a woman, a child, echoes of past tragedies. The whispers circled the cold spot, growing louder, impossible to block out. One voice separated from the rest, desperate and close. "Help! Help me!" Liam's fear was replaced by dread as he realized the plea came from the wardrobe. The cold, the voices, the despair, all pointed to that looming shadowed cabinet. Liam stared at the wardrobe as the room's shadows began to writhe and detach, pooling in the center. The darkness thickened, reality blurring as the shadows swirled around the cold spot. The mass of darkness rose, forming a tall, faceless figure that seemed to drink the light. The whispers faded to a low, vibrating hum as the shadow turned toward Liam. He felt its attention, its hunger, a predator closing in. Liam was cornered, the nightmare now fully awake. The shadow advanced, and Liam, desperate, lunged for the wardrobe, the source of the cold and the whispers. The door was locked. Panic surged as he rattled the handle until a whisper, "The key!" He found it on the nightstand, snatched it, and fumbled with the lock as the shadow loomed closer. The hum intensified, cold breath on his neck. The lock clicked. He threw himself inside, slamming the door shut just as the shadow reached him. Darkness swallowed him whole. He was alone, but not safe. Inside the wardrobe, Liam was enveloped in suffocating blackness, surrounded by the scent of cedar and decay. Old clothes brushed his skin. Claustrophobia threatened to overwhelm him. His hands found grooves carved into the wood, letters, words, a message left by another. Someone else had hidden here, desperate and afraid. Liam traced the carvings, realizing he was not the first to seek refuge in this darkness. The wardrobe was a tomb of secrets. Liam deciphered the desperate message. "My name is Thomas. Thomas, the boy from the portrait, the lost guest." The confession revealed the truth. Ilara and Arthur were predators, the house a trap that fed on souls. Thomas warned of the shadow, the soul drinker, and left a final clue. The clock must strike. Liam remembered the frozen grandfather clock in the hall. The message ended abruptly. Outside, a new sound shattered the silence. The house was not done with him yet. A low, guttural groan echoed from beyond the wardrobe, ancient, hungry. Liam pressed his eye to the keyhole, heart pounding. Arthur, once frail, now stood tall, eyes glowing red, shadows swirling around him. The house demanded souls. Ilara lured them in. Now, it was Liam's turn. He had to escape. Liam pulled back from the keyhole, his mind reeling. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, forming a picture of unimaginable horror. This was no simple haunting. It was a system, a cycle. Ilara was the bait, the welcoming face that disarmed her victims. The house itself was the trap, a labyrinth of whispering walls and shifting shadows designed to terrify and weaken its prey. And Arthur, the silent husband, was the final instrument, the collector who harvested the souls needed to sustain his own unnatural existence and feed the ancient entity they called home. It was a partnership born of desperation and dark magic. He thought back to his arrival. The stalled car, the perfectly placed light on the hill. It was all too convenient. Had his car breaking down been an accident, or had the house itself engineered it? He remembered Ilara's words. "We were expecting you." They hadn't been expecting him specifically, but they were always expecting someone. They had set a beacon, a light in the darkness, and waited patiently for a lost and desperate traveller to follow it. He was not the first, and if they succeeded, he would not be the last. The portraits on the wall were not just family. They were a gallery of victims, their souls trapped within the walls. The trap was not just physical, it was psychological. Every element of the house was designed to inspire fear and hopelessness. The silent dinner, the whispering library, the scratching at the window, the cold spots. It was all a performance. It was a way to season the meal, to fill the victim with terror, which perhaps made the soul easier to harvest or more potent. Liam realized he had been played from the moment he saw the light on the hill. His fear, his exhaustion, his desperation, they had all been used against him, guiding him deeper and deeper into the web. Now, he understood the true meaning of Ilara's words. The night has ears. The roads are not safe after dark. They weren't warnings about the outside world. They were threats about the house itself. The only thing unsafe after dark was being under her roof. He was a lamb invited into the wolf's den, and he had walked in willingly. The sense of dread he felt was replaced by a surge of cold anger, at Ilara, at Arthur, and at himself for being so blind. But anger wouldn't save him. Thomas's final message was his only hope, the clock. The clock must strike. Hiding in the suffocating darkness, Liam focused on the frozen clock downstairs, 3:07. Thomas's message echoed, "Start the clock, break the cycle." He had to get out, reach the clock, and avoid the soul-collecting creature that was once Arthur. Every nerve screamed as he slipped from the wardrobe, praying for a chance at escape. With trembling hands, he unlocked the door and stepped into the darkness. Liam crept into the dark hallway, every step echoing in the silence. He reached the grand staircase, heart pounding, and saw the shrouded grandfather clock below. With trembling hands, he pulled away the sheet. Just as he reached for the pendulum, a low chuckle sounded. Ilara stood above, smiling in the shadows. In the haunted house, Ilara descended the stairs, her eyes glittering with predatory hunger. Liam stood frozen by the grandfather clock, realizing the truth. The faces in the wood were souls, trapped by the house. Ilara hissed, "Don't you dare! You don't know what you're doing." From the dark hallway to the kitchen, a shape emerged. It was Arthur, no longer cloaked in shadow, but just as terrifying. His skin was pale and waxy in the firelight, and his eyes were two burning red coals fixed on Liam. He let out a low growl, a sound of pure predatory intent, and began his slow, shambling advance. Ilara watched from the stairs, her face a mask of cold fury. "He's hungry," she said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "And you have been a very rude guest. Now you will pay the price for your shelter. You will join the others. You will help keep my Arthur strong." Liam was out of time. Arthur was closing in from one side, and Ilara was descending from the other. The whispering in the walls rose to a frantic crescendo, 1,000 trapped voices screaming at him. He looked from the approaching horror of Arthur to the desperate, silent faces trapped in the wood of the clock. He had a choice. Let Arthur take him, his soul becoming another face in the grain, another whisper in the walls, or take a leap of faith and trust the ghost of a boy he'd never met. He chose to trust Thomas. He chose to fight back. "No," Liam said, his voice surprisingly steady. He looked directly at Ilara, at the monster hiding behind the mask of a frail old woman. "It ends tonight." With that, he ignored the approaching Arthur and plunged his hand deeper into the clock. He grabbed the heavy brass pendulum, the metal shockingly cold, and gave it a hard shove. For a moment, nothing happened. The pendulum swung to one side, and then with a groan of ancient rusted gears, it began to swing back. Tick. The sound was quiet, almost lost in the chorus of whispers, but its effect was instantaneous and violent. The moment the first tick echoed in the hall, a blinding flash of white light erupted from the clock face. A powerful shockwave threw Liam backward onto the floor. The whispering voices rose into a single deafening shriek of release. The faces in the wood of the clock glowed with intense light, their expressions of horror turning into something else, something unreadable before they faded. The dam had broken. Time, held back for so long, came rushing in like a tidal wave. And Liam lay on the floor, his ears ringing, as the house began to scream. The first tick of the clock was a whisper. The second was a scream, not from Liam, but from the house itself. The walls twisted, the floor buckled, and the air filled with ghostly energy. The house was dying, collapsing in on itself. Liam had to escape, or be buried with its secrets. Liam's eyes found Arthur. The shambling creature was caught in the blinding light from the clock, and he was no longer advancing. He stood frozen in the middle of the hall, his body convulsing violently. The shadows that had once cloaked him were gone, ripped away by the pure light, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. His skin, which had been waxy and preserved, was now cracking like dry clay. Deep fissures spread across his face and hands, and a fine grey dust began to pour from the widening cracks. He was unravelling, his borrowed time finally running out. The energy that had sustained him was gone, and his unnatural body could no longer hold itself together. He raised his hands to his face, his movements jerky and panicked. He looked at his own crumbling fingers with an expression of pure, dawning horror. For the first time, Liam saw a flicker of the man he might have once been. The red glow in his eyes faded, replaced by a look of confusion and terror. The monster was gone, leaving only a frightened old man who was turning to dust before his very eyes. Arthur opened his mouth, not to growl, but to speak. A dry, rasping whisper escaped his lips, a single word that was swallowed by the screaming of the house. Ilara. The process accelerated. His expensive, old-fashioned suit crumbled away, turning to ash and falling to the floor. His torso caved in, a cloud of grey dust billowing out from his chest. His legs buckled, and he collapsed into a heap on the floor, no longer a man, but simply a pile of fine powder and brittle yellowed bones. The pact was broken. The life force he had stolen from Thomas and countless others was gone, and all that was left was what time had been owed for so many decades. He had been a walking corpse, and now, finally, he was allowed to be dust. Liam stared at the pile of remains, a mixture of horror and pity churning in his stomach. This was the fate Arthur had chosen, or that had been chosen for him. A life sustained by the suffering of others had ended in a few horrifying seconds of dissolution. The ticking of the clock continued its steady, merciless rhythm. Tick-tock. It was the sound of justice, of a natural order being violently restored. The web was destroyed. But the spider was still somewhere in the chaos, and Liam knew she would not let him go that easily. The true evil of the house was not the collector, but the one who held his leash. He turned his attention to the grand staircase. Ilara was no longer descending. The blast had thrown her against the wall, and she was struggling to her feet amidst the raining plaster and splintering wood. But she was not crumbling like Arthur. The light did not seem to affect her in the same way. Instead, a different, more horrifying transformation was taking place. The mask of the frail, elderly woman was melting away, her skin tightening against her skull. Her eyes, once sharp and clear, now burned with a cold, black fire. Her white hair writhed around her head as if it were alive. The kindly host was gone, replaced by the ancient, malevolent witch she truly was. "You fool!" she shrieked, her voice cutting through the din of the collapsing house. It was no longer a dry whisper, but a powerful, rage-filled command. "You have ruined everything. Centuries of work, undone by a frightened little boy." She pointed a long, bony finger at Liam, her hand tipped with nails that had become long, yellowed talons. "You will not leave this place. If this house is to be my tomb, it will be yours as well." She was not afraid of the house's destruction. Her only rage was for her failed project, for the loss of her immortal love. Her grief was a weapon, and it was aimed directly at him. As she screamed, the house seemed to obey her final commands. A large wooden beam from the ceiling splintered and broke, crashing down to block the path to the front door, showering Liam with splinters. The floorboards around him began to crack and split open, revealing a dark, empty void below. Ilara was trying to bury him alive, to make him a permanent part of the rubble. She was the heart of the house's malevolence, and even as her kingdom collapsed around her, her hatred gave her power. She would not allow him the victory of escape. Liam dodged another falling piece of the ceiling. He was trapped. The way forward was blocked, and the house was coming down around him. Ilara's laughter, a high, piercing cackle of triumph, echoed above the screams of the house. She stood on the disintegrating staircase, a queen on a crumbling throne, watching him with pure, unadulterated hatred. He had taken her husband, her home, her immortality, and now she would take his life. There was nowhere left to run. He was cornered, waiting for the final blow to fall. Just as Ilara raised her hands to bring the rest of the ceiling down on him, the quality of the light in the room changed. The brilliant white light from the clock softened, and from it, shimmering, translucent shapes began to emerge. They were human figures, dozens of them, made of pale, ethereal light. They floated out from the clock one by one, filling the collapsing hall. It was the souls, the faces from the wood, finally freed from their prison. They were men, women, and children, dressed in the fashions of centuries past. They were a silent, ghostly army, and they all turned their vacant eyes toward the witch on the stairs. Leading them was a figure Liam recognized instantly. It was the young man from the portrait, the boy who had left the message in the wardrobe. Thomas. He looked just as he did in the painting, but his expression was no longer one of fear. It was calm, serene, and determined. He floated in the air before the others, his spectral form a beacon of peace in the violent chaos. He looked at Liam and gave a slow, grateful nod. It was a gesture of thanks, a recognition of the promise fulfilled. Then, he turned his attention to Ilara, and his calm expression hardened into one of cold, righteous judgment. Ilara froze, her face a mask of disbelief and terror. The rage vanished, replaced by a primal fear Liam had not thought her capable of. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Go back. You are mine. You belong to the house." She had been their jailer for centuries, feeding on their essence. Now, her prisoners were free, and they had come to confront her. They began to float toward the staircase, a silent, unstoppable tide of light. They did not look angry or vengeful. They simply looked empty. They had come to collect what was owed. The spirits swirled around the base of the staircase, a silent vortex of pale light. They did not touch Ilara, but their presence was overwhelming. They simply stared at her, their collective gaze a heavy weight. Thomas floated directly in front of her, his face inches from hers. He raised a translucent hand, not to strike her, but to offer her something. Ilara stared at his hand, then at his face, and the last of her defiance shattered. A single human tear traced a path down her monstrous cheek. The witch was gone, and all that was left was a lonely, grieving woman who had made a terrible bargain. As Ilara faced the spirits, they merged with her, their light dissolving her darkness. Her reign ended, the path cleared. Liam ran, escaping into the dawn. Behind him, the haunted house stood for a final moment. Then, with the last tick of the clock, it silently collapsed, leaving only emptiness and the first light of morning. As dawn broke, silence replaced the house's screams. Liam stood trembling on the muddy track, the haunted hill now empty behind him. The air was fresh, the nightmare gone, but its ghost would follow him forever. He walked away, each step heavy, until his car appeared in the mist, his escape from a night that would never truly leave him. The car's engine was the sound of escape. Liam sped away, not daring to look back at the house on the hill. He drove through empty roads, haunted by memories, feeling forever changed. When he finally stopped, exhaustion hit. On the passenger seat lay a single, rusted iron key, the key to the wardrobe he'd left behind. A souvenir, a warning. The story wasn't over.